Good morning and welcome everyone. I'm going to invite us to rise in body and spirit to begin our morning with a song, number 348, Guide My Feet. The words are on the screen, or if you want to read the music along with, you can open up the gray hymnal to number 348. It seemed like we needed a little burst of energy on this spring-forward morning, so I wanted to congratulate all of you for have accomplished the first great task of the day, which is to arrive here, sprung ahead 1 hour. Good job, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara, and I want to welcome you with these words from our gray hymnal, which is full of wonderful words if you haven't had a chance to take a look. This is number 434. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. We are here this morning to honor that impulse of interconnection, to reconnect with one another in a divided world, to find comfort and strength and hope as we gather each and every week here at the Unitarian Society. I'm the Reverend Julia Hamilton. My pronouns are she, her, and I am so glad that you have chosen to spend time here with us this morning in this loving community of seekers, where we strive to live with integrity, nurture wonder, and inspire the actions that transform us and transform the world. I'd like to welcome you here in our physical sanctuary, as well as those of you who are joining us in our virtual sanctuary online. We are one community on one earth under the same sky, and it is good to be together. I'd like to extend a special welcome to anyone who is joining us for the first or maybe second time, friends, family, near and far. We would love to get to know you better, and we do have a newcomer orientation on the second Sunday of every month, which is this Sunday, which means that folks will be gathering in the office right across the courtyard here to answer any questions you might have about the Unitarian Society, get to know other newcomers, and find out more about how you can get connected to this community. If you want to find out more about how you can get connected to this community, I encourage you to fill out the visitor form if you're joining us online, or the connection card you can find at the welcome table. And normally there's an insert in the order of service with all kinds of fantastic things. However, there's a challenge this week. You're going to have to read your email on Fridays, because we had a misprint in the order of service this morning. So that insert isn't there, but I want to highlight a few of the things that are coming up in this very active month beyond Sunday morning. And the first is that next weekend is a wonderful opportunity to refresh your spring closet with our Fashion Fling. This is the week to bring your consignment quality clothes here, drop them off on campus anytime during the week, and then next Sunday invite friends, family, neighbors. All are welcome to find new treasures at our Fashion Fling, this annual really fun event for everyone. So keep an eye out for that. This week, we also have our Contemporary Issues Forum coming up, an opportunity to engage with the issues of our time. And this month, we have invited a professor from UCSB who works on something called the allosphere, which is a dynamic way of artistically interpreting data in a visual environment. And I've visited the allosphere myself. It's quite a remarkable thing she is working on with this project of researchers at UCSB, so I encourage you to consider coming to the Contemporary Issues Forum. If a more reflective evening is your speed this week, we do have our monthly Taizé service, our evening service of quiet music, some silence, some readings, a way to refresh midweek. That's Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock. We fill the candlelight with sanctuary. Our intern minister, Carolyn Bjerke, and I will be leading that service on Tuesday. And finally, I want to bring everyone's attention to the town hall we are having next Sunday, where we are going to be talking more about the vision for our capital campaign that is coming up this fall, including some of the first renderings from our architect about how we might re-envision some of these spaces on our campus. It is really wonderful to be able to present to the whole congregation these first glimpses that our building team has been seeing, and I'm excited to see you all there. I invite you now to take a breath. There is so much going on in the life of this community and in the lives of each of us who gather. I invite you to give yourself the gift of this hour, to be fully present to this community and to yourself as we ring our bell and let the sound connect us.
This morning, all over the world, in UU congregations, the chalice is being kindled. And we join in that with these words. We move forward despite what is external. We awaken in darkness and rise before dawn. The first flowers of spring do not wait for the sun's warmth. We do not ask if this is the right time to kindle our chalice. It is lit whenever we are together, in times of joy, in sadness, and in times of celebration, for our community of faith and the world we share. Every Sunday we highlight one good thing, and this morning it is Women's History Month, which began as a week-long gathering in Santa Rosa, California in 1976. By 1986, 14 states had declared March as Women's History Month. In 1987, Congress designated it as a date in March. March was chosen because it incorporated International Women's Day, which was yesterday. This began in Russia in 1911, when on March 8th, women demonstrated against the Tsarist regime, which led to its overthrow the following year. In Congress' proclamation, it mentions that this is an opportunity to celebrate ordinary women. I can assure you that none of the women in my life could be considered ordinary, and it's a great honor to celebrate them all.
Before we sing again, I invite us to turn to each other for just a brief moment and introduce yourself, say hello, welcome each other into the space. I know we have been gathering in communities large and small on the street. This is an opportunity to say hello. All right, everyone, I am so delighted, as always, to hear the buzz of conversation in the room, and a reminder that these are just the seeds of this connection that we can continue after the service over coffee, tea, and conversation. But now I'm going to invite you to rise once again in body and spirit to sing number 360, Here We Have Gathered. Now, I do want to make a note. There is a minor amendment to the words that are printed in your order of service. The words on the screen have a minor edit to switch over to some less gendered language. Is there anyone who would like to join me this morning up here on the steps for a story? I get to tell you a story. Charlotte gets to sit and listen to this story today. Charlotte is often the person who's telling the story, but today I get to tell the story. So if you want to come up a little bit closer, you are more than welcome to. And at the end, I'm going to need some help from a couple folks, but I'm sure we'll find some volunteers to help out. Hi, Dylan. Come on up here. Come on up. So the story we're going to talk about this morning is a very, very old story. And we tell all kinds of stories here at the Unitarian Society from all kinds of places, and this one comes from ancient Greece. How many of you have read stories, myths from ancient Greece? How many of you have read some of those, right? So they've stuck around for a long time, often because we find wisdom in the stories that we tell over time. So this is a story about someone named Narcissus. Now, Narcissus was the son of a river god and a river nymph. A river nymph is kind of like a spirit who lives in the water. And Narcissus, as a baby, everyone agreed, was the most beautiful baby anyone had ever seen. Now, I know every parent thinks their baby is the most beautiful baby, and all of your parents think that you are the most beautiful babies, but everyone agreed that this baby was something special. And Narcissus grew and grew into what everyone agreed was a beautiful, beautiful human being. And in fact, so many people told Narcissus so often that he was the most beautiful person that they'd ever seen, that he started to think that, well, when he was going to fall in love with somebody, they needed to be just as beautiful as he was. And lots of people fell in love with Narcissus, but he never fell in love with anyone else. And one day he was out hunting in the woods, and he stopped by a cool stream where there was a little pool of still water to dip his hands and splash some water on his face to cool off because he was warm from hunting. And as he bent down into this look in the pool in front of him, he saw the most beautiful person he had ever seen. What was Narcissus seeing when he bent and leaned down over the water? Anybody guess? Himself. He saw his own reflection in the pool, and he was so awed by the beauty of what he saw. He was transfixed. He couldn't move. He just stayed there and stared at himself in the water. And he longed to talk to this other person in the water, and he reached out and he put his hand in the water, but the ripples disturbed it, and the person went away. So he sat very still until the water got still, and he could see this beautiful person again. And do you know what happened? He fell so in love with his own reflection in the water that he stayed right there until he wasted away and died. And when that happened, one of the gods took pity on him and turned him into a beautiful flower that would always grow along the side of water that people could admire the beauty of. And that's how we remember the story of Narcissus. It's a bit of a cautionary tale, I think, right? Narcissus doesn't really come to a very good end from falling in love with himself, staring into the water. In fact, we get a word that we use a lot in English language called narcissism. It's a word that means somebody who can't love anyone but themselves. And it's a word that we get from this ancient story that we still tell. And because we're talking about that this morning, I have something that I need a volunteer for. I have actually 2 volunteers willing to stand right here, almost. 2 volunteers, just stand right across from each other. Charlotte, maybe you can demonstrate with me. So, you want to come stand right here? And Dylan, you want to come stand right here? And I'm going to give you a mirror, like this, and I'm going to give Charlotte a mirror. And here, you want to come stand next to me here, Hux? Now, I want you to hold that mirror up between you so you can see your face in the mirror. Can you see the other person? What do you see? You just see yourself. How do you know what the other person is thinking and feeling when you can only see yourself? This is what Narcissus experienced, and this is what we call narcissism. Thank you for helping me demonstrate with these mirrors. I'm going to give them to Charlotte to bring back down. And we can sing you all to your classes this morning. We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go, to nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go. I invite us now into a moment of prayer and meditation, a moment where we can still ourselves in community. I invite you to pay attention once again to your body in this space. Perhaps allow your breathing to slow, holding yourself comfortable wherever you are. Perhaps your hands open gently on your lap, your eyes closed or your gaze soft, however you prefer. And I'm going to invite us to practice a meta-meditation. This is something we do quite often during this time together on Sunday mornings. An opportunity to practice compassion, an opportunity to soften our hearts that are so often guarded as we go about our week, an opportunity to stay flexible and alive to this moment, to what is stirring within you, so that you may meet this moment in the world. So first, I invite you to just pay attention to your breathing, the breath as it moves softly in and out of your body, the breath that sustains you and grounds you. And with this meta-meditation, we're going to move in ever-widening circles of compassion. But we're going to begin with ourselves. Sometimes the hardest place to extend compassion. And bring yourself right into the very core of your being. And say to yourself, may you be well. May you be healthy and happy and whole. May you be at peace. Breathe another breath in and out into this compassionate place in your heart. And now call to mind someone who it is easy to love. Pull down that mirror and instead see the face of someone you know, a very specific, particular person in your life for whom it is easy to feel compassion. And say to that person as you bring them to mind, may you be well. May you be happy and healthy and whole. May you be at peace. As you breathe in and out, continuing to return to that breath when your mind wanders, extend that circle of compassion again and imagine someone you are acquainted with but don't really know very well. An actual, real human being out there in the world who you cross paths with from time to time, but maybe you don't even know their name. Maybe it's the clerk at the grocery store, someone you work with, a neighbor. Call them to mind in all of their beautiful particularity, all of their humanity, and say to this person, may you be well. May you be happy and healthy and whole. May you be at peace. And here is where we begin to stretch our hearts, to practice the deep compassion for the world that is not always simple, not always easy. I invite you to call to mind someone with whom you may experience some friction. Someone with whom maybe you have had an argument that is unresolved. Someone whom you find it hard on some days to like, much less love. Challenge yourself to call that person to mind and say to them, may you be well. May you be happy and healthy and whole. May you be at peace. And with one more breath in and one more breath out, reminding that we breathe together every day, extend that circle of compassion as wide as your imagination can hold it, encompassing all of this community outside the walls of this congregation, outside the bounds of Santa Barbara County, outside the bounds of any border we human beings have laid upon the earth, as wide as you can extend that circle of compassion until it encompasses all. And say to all beings everywhere, may you be well. May you be happy and healthy and whole. May you be at peace. Let us enter into a time of quiet where we hold that compassionate regard as wide as we can cast it in a world that is in such desperate need.
I was raised in a conservative religious environment. Traditional beliefs and strict social code. There was a minister and a board of elders, all men, of course. Women ran the Sunday school and catered the events. There was no questioning of dogma or creed. Those who did so were shunned. Sermons consisted of moral lessons from the Bible. During the run-up to our confirmation, we were encouraged to ask questions, but never received any coherent answers. Someday we would understand, so patience was a virtue. Or we would never understand, and that's what faith is all about. I don't remember buying into any of it. Not that it bothered me much. I was 14. As the minister droned on in our religious education group, I was thinking about the girls. Architecture and industrial design is my background, but for many years, I got away from it. Then my wife Donis and I had the good fortune to design and build our own home here in Santa Barbara. I loved the process and wanted to get back to it. I enrolled in the computer design program at City College, and upon completion, saw an index card tacked up on the bulletin board, a job opening at the new big box store, home center out in Goleta. They needed someone to set up their kitchen and bath department. I applied, I got the job. Welcome to corporate culture. This was my first and last time. Right off the bat, I was confronted with dogma and creed again. It seemed somehow familiar. There was a corporate manual delineating the hierarchical structure of staff, governance, and proper procedures. There was a list of corporate values that hung in the locker room. More importantly, there was a thick employee manual, or Bible, as I thought of it, covering everything from dress code to interacting with the public. Underlined in red, in bold caps, was never say no to a customer. You could say, I don't know, or let me get someone to help you, or my favorite, I'll be right back. I was issued an orange apron, which I was encouraged to accessorize. Every morning, the employees would gather for a pep talk from management, who would then lead us in the company cheer and song, which I will spare you this morning. There was a lot of talk about teamwork and going all out for the customer. But the actual rules spoke against doing this. For example, my responsibilities consisted of meeting with customers, defining the parameters of their project, and designing it. We had a guy who would measure the space and give me a floor plan of their home. I could not visit the site myself. I considered that a vital part of my job. There were 2 girls in charge of pricing, ordering, and interacting with the manufacturers. I couldn't do that either. The biggest obstacle to rapport was the time limit placed on how long we could take with potential clients. 20 minutes. Perhaps the store was ahead of its time in this, as my doctor has also adopted this system. I could never square what was happening on the ground with the lofty values hanging in the locker room. They didn't work in lots of ways. On the one hand, we were told to adhere to corporate rules religiously and concentrate on selling merchandise, as the design service was free. On the other hand, we needed to be engaging, respectful, and creative. I started breaking the rules right away. I would go meet with people in their homes on my own time to understand what they wanted or thought they wanted and get a feel for their home environment. I brought this up in our pep rallies and my private talks with management. I was warned not to get a reputation as a complainer. Follow the rules and you'll never be wrong. Human beings are unique in that we can embrace two separate and conflicting realities at the same time. But it doesn't last forever. People wake up or start acting out in weird ways. One night I went into the receiving area and there were two guys, each on their own forklift, dueling with each other and careening around the room. The next morning I went in to check on my shipment of cabinets. One box had a hole in the side exactly matching the metal arms of that forklift. The cabinet was trashed. The floor manager said he would sign it off as having been damaged in shipment. As far as I know, these guys never were disciplined. After all, there were no rules against dueling with forklifts in the employee manual. I worked with a gentleman who would disappear for lengthy intervals. One afternoon, I found him napping between the great rolls of carpet in the warehouse. There was a young woman I had partnered with who had a drinking problem. She not only drank on the job, but would come into the store on her days off and sleep under the desk. One of the women in the order department would scream violent abuse at me for just breathing her air. I never found out what this was about, but I couldn't say anything to her because she would just accidentally, of course, misplace my paperwork. After a year, I knew it was time to end this craziness. And as so often happens, fate steps in to lend a hand. I had a client, an elegant woman, somewhere in her 60s, always attended to by her companion, an enthusiastic younger man. She explained that she wanted a new bedroom suite with lots of light, bright colors, and a new bathroom with the most expensive features. After a week, we met, and I gave her my proposal, which she liked. But her companion spoke up. But wouldn't it be nice to have a balcony with French doors? Back to the drawing boards I went. At our next meeting, he said that there needed to be even more light and suggested large skylights could be included. This I did, and at our next meeting, she came alone and confided that she had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And this was the room she had always dreamed of and where she wanted to end her days. At our next meeting, the companion came alone with a long list of changes and additions. It became clear to me what he was doing. As the inheritor of her estate, he was delaying the whole process to avoid spending what he now considered his money. I told him I was resigning and he would have to get someone else to work with. You mean you're not going to include these changes? He said angrily. No, I'm not. And you all remember the company policy about saying no to a customer. He showed up the very next morning and berated the HR director, who called me into her office and said, "Turn in your apron, you're fired." Fine. That's just fine. And it was fine because I started my own business, one in which there was no rules but my own, in which I could take as much time as needed to work with people. Follow the rules and you'll never be wrong. That's one approach to life. I need to be part of a community without a rule book, where we live by principles and purposes and the right of conscience to decide for ourselves what is right and life-affirming. Sometimes it's a hard and lonely road, but ultimately rewarding, and the only one I want to travel on. Each Sunday we donate 25% of our offering to a worthy cause, and this month it has been to the Children's Easter Egg Hunt for Justice, where the kids decide for themselves where they will spend the money. Will you please join me in reading our affirmation of gratitude and giving on the TV or in your order of service? Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us be grateful even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others.
We don't often get to hear our beautiful organ played every Sunday, so it is a delight to have Kevin sharing his talents with us this morning. Thank you, Kevin, for bringing the organ to life. Good morning. So the conservative Christian theologian, writer, and pastor Joe Rigney knew that he was being provocative with the title of his new book, The Sin of Empathy. It's a provocative title, right? And at first, the hook did just what it was intended to do. It got my attention. I thought, that's a new one. Empathy, framed as a sin. Well, what will these conservative pastors come up with next? And I was ready to move on. After all, if I spent all day trying to examine and refute every argument from conservative Christian authors, I would barely have time for more important other things like walking my dog through the green hills or watching the eaglets in their nest on the live cam from Big Bear. How many of you have been watching the eagles and their babies? I highly recommend it to you. And if you're watching us from home, I won't mind if you have it on the screen next to the service. It is a shortcut to awe and wonder. But back to the more mundane topic at hand. Like I said, I was ready to move on when I realized that this thought, this perspective, that empathy itself was somehow a fundamental flaw to be remedied rather than a spiritual capacity to be cultivated. This idea was starting to gain some traction. The book itself isn't even out yet. It's to be released next week. But like any author, Joe Rigney has done innumerable interviews, pre-release podcasts, and has been writing articles about this idea for several years. And he is not shy about his political beliefs and how they intersect with his theology. And so bubbling up in the political sphere, I start to hear shadows of this theology. And anytime a religious or theological concept starts to make itself felt in the political and civic spaces that affect all of us, I think it's important that liberal religious thinkers pay attention. As I've said many times before, we can't let conservative voices be the only ones who get to define what religion means in our world. So when someone like Elon Musk goes on a podcast and says that the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy, and that they're exploiting a bug in the system, this empathetic response as a bug in the system of Western civilization, I can't help but take notice that this theological view is spreading. So to put it in Silicon Valley terms, is empathy a bug or a feature of our humanity? Is it something we should squash or something we should cultivate? So although I am still making time to go for walks up in the hills, I have also been reading up on what exactly Rigney meant when he talked about the sin of empathy. And at first it seemed like it was mostly just a semantic argument about the definition of the word. In several of his articles, he says that he supports ideals like compassion and sympathy. But empathy he defines as something else. In several of his articles, he says it is a passion, a dangerously powerful feeling that can sweep away rational thought and can be easily manipulated or exploited. We have been manipulated by our capacity for empathy, he says. Because if we join together in a big blob of emotion, he says, you don't just destroy yourself, but you destroy your family, you destroy your church, you destroy your community. So there is a deep fundamental theological question, he says, behind all of this. Is God God, or are our feelings God? And he goes back to the Latin and Greek roots to bolster his case. Compassion and sympathy, he says, are okay, but because that means to suffer with, to feel with. But in empathy, he says, we lose ourselves. It means putting yourself into the feelings of another person, putting yourself in their shoes, rather than simply trying to walk alongside them. Or as he puts it, sympathy is someone falling into a pit and trying to help them, and empathy is jumping into the pit with them. And from his point of view, that is not helpful. Now, I suppose this might be a good metaphor when you're in physical danger. It's akin to put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. When the plane is crashing, that might be good advice. But there's something more complex about human feelings than simply responding to physical danger. And if he stopped there, if he stopped with embracing sympathy and compassion instead of empathy, I wouldn't be preaching a sermon about it. Although I love words and I think they matter quite a bit, I'm not going to get into a big fight with you about whether when Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, he was talking about compassion or empathy. As long as you are loving your neighbor, I don't much care what you call it. But after digging a little deeper, it became clear there was a much bigger concept at stake than just splitting hairs about different definitions of words. Because after discussing these definitions and condemning empathy as a dangerous passion that can lead one to over-identify with the feelings of another, the underlying conversation emerged, which was about power, gender, identity, and sexuality. Rigney adheres to a conservative theological tradition that does not ordain women or allow them into organizational leadership positions within the church. He condemns homosexuality, and it goes without saying that he does not affirm the rights or even the existence of people who are transgender. He believes there is a natural order to the world, ordained by God, communicated through the Bible, and upheld by a hierarchy of power. A hierarchy that puts men in charge of discerning what is true and right, and charges women with nurturing the family under the leadership of the men who are charged with ruling the world. Or as he said in an interview, rejecting empathy as a virtue means you don't allow yourself as a man to be held hostage by other people's feelings, like those of your wife or children. And it means you don't have to feel guilty about the suffering of people you don't know, like immigrants at the border. And it means that you don't allow another person's feelings to override your understanding of the truth, as in the case of when a person feels their gender doesn't match their physical form. And so you can see why this theology might be attractive to some people who are already holding power. As he puts it, feelings should be governed by truth. Which on the surface sounds somewhat benign. After all, who doesn't like truth? But of course, it prompts the question, who gets to decide what is true? And it is also a clever way of saying that women, with their dangerous, overly empathetic passions that can be so easily manipulated, should be governed by men who by their God-given nature are better able to discern truth from falsehood. Or to put it in words that have become a cultural cliche, Father knows best. And what happens when this natural order is not followed? What happens when, God forbid, you let a woman into the pulpit? As Rigney said in an interview, it is no surprise that in a culture which has become dominated by feminism, it is deep in the American system by this point, that in that same time frame you would have an outbreak of empathy that would become the steering wheel by which every institution is hijacked. That is to say, people who are currently in positions of great power influenced directly by this kind of patriarchal theology, are hard at work trying to cure the outbreak of empathy among us. There are other outbreaks I think are more urgent. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this sermon, normally I wouldn't spend this much time deconstructing a conservative theological position that I so obviously disagree with. But this position, this misogynistic anti-empathy movement, is growing in power and influence, and it is not just in the conservative pulpits of churches, which we can opt out of, thankfully, but it is influencing the minds and hearts of those in power in our government and civic spaces, which we cannot opt out of. So what is our theological response? How do we defend empathy as a feature and not a bug of human civilization? It seems to me that the God Rigney describes, the God that rejects empathy and requires adherence to a singular truth, embodied and expressed in a singular gender, that this is the very definition of narcissism. That is to say, instead of God creating humankind in the image of the divine, this is clearly God imagined very specifically in the image of the men who created him. An infallible patriarch, a reflection of their own desire for power and control. Like Narcissus, unable to love anyone as deeply as they love themselves. Unable to empathize, unable to fully grasp the worth, dignity, and beauty of the lives of people below them in the divinely ordained hierarchy of power. And in a hierarchical structure like that one, this reflection of self then ripples downward, seeking to replicate itself in each layer of relationship. But what does empathy do in this system? Empathy disrupts this reflective process. It interrupts the iteration of the self by asking us that we acknowledge another person, someone else, someone other who has thoughts and feelings of their own. It forces us to do the hard work of grappling with another person's reality and letting that influence our life in the process. Empathy, the process of imagining another person's feelings in any given situation. This is not about losing yourself, not about submerging yourself in another person or letting their feelings completely override your own. Rather, it's about granting that they are fully human too. Just as human as you are, with thoughts and feelings that are no less real than your own, with no less of a right to self-determination than you have. In short, empathy allows us to understand that other people are real as ourselves. It crosses the boundaries of identity to arrive at the fundamental truth of our shared humanity. Empathy is the opposite of narcissism. It sees the other person and asks, not what do I see of myself in you, but what parts of you might I find within myself? It decentralizes you for a moment. It places you, me, everyone on equal footing as part of a web of interconnected relationships, not a tower of power, as it were. In this room, in this faith, each of us may hold a different definition of God or the divine or the sacred, or hold no need for a God concept at all. But no matter what definition of the divine we might embrace, the fact that we hold pluralism as a value means it must be a non-hierarchical definition of the divine. A definition of what is sacred that is less about the unchanging revelation of a singular fixed truth and more about the divine as ever evolving, always becoming, this beautiful diversity of truths that we search for in each other's company. And if we embrace this evolutionary idea of humanity, that we are not created and fixed at a single point, if we embrace evolution, and I'll hazard to say that we do, rather than being the downfall of Western civilization, biologist E.O. Wilson argues that social relationships cultivated through skills like empathy are in fact what have allowed human beings to grow and flourish. Cooperative skills are what give us the gift of our humanity, of our thriving. We have survived thousands and thousands of years telling stories like the ones we tell here, because we have developed things like mirror neurons in our brain, the actual synapses that fire off when we see someone else doing something that we recognize. Our brains mirror it in each other. These neurons allowed to evolve us to understand each other, not as moral abstractions, which is what Rigney called people who live far away, who you don't know who are suffering. They're simply a moral abstraction. Empathy allows us to see each other as real, full human beings. Far from being a modern problem brought about by feminism, learning how to feel what another person might be feeling has a basis deep in our evolutionary roots. Now, I make no claims of special knowledge. In our tradition, ministers are not considered to have any special relationship with the divine that is unavailable to others. It is why we share our stories here on Sunday morning. That is part of the non-hierarchical tradition of this faith, that I am here as a collaborator with you, a co-worker for our collective liberation, engaging in the search for truth and meaning, rather than assuming that any one of us has all the answers. But I do believe that the evolving capacity to love each other, to feel empathy and compassion for each other, whatever you want to call it, to be able to see the worth of others, that this is as close to a definition of God in the world as I can find. Not a narcissistic God created in our own image, a father figure in the sky with a long white beard, a patriarch with all the answers, but instead the divine imagined as an intuition, a sensibility, dare I say, a feeling, an evolving capacity for connection that has no gender, but a sacred feeling that ripples through all of us and each of us, not as a reflection of our own selves, but a recognition of our interconnection, our community, the way we resonate with each other in each other's company that allows us to survive, the ability to know we are not alone and that we are held in love. When someone is feeling powerless, afraid, or hurt, or otherwise suffering, we can either hand them a mirror and tell them to create a God out of their own reflection, or we can sit across from them, be with them. Yes, sometimes even climb down into that pit of despair with them, until they realize they are not alone and that we are strong together and that we can find a way out of the pit together. And any leadership of any gender that does not value that feeling of connection, that intuition of interdependence, that awareness of the worth and dignity of other people, any leadership that confuses their own reflection for the face of God, that is not someone I am willing to follow. Because together we can find another way. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Let us practice not just in words, but also in singing. Let us sing together number 299, Make Channels for the Streams of Love.
Such is the law of love.
I invite you to stay right where you are, wherever you find yourself, however you get connected to that sense of being part of something larger than yourself. You can put your hands over your heart or hold hands with someone nearby if you have permission from them, or simply hold your hand open. And as you go out into this heartbreaking and beautiful world, may the light of love shine upon you, out from within you, be gracious unto you, and bring you peace. For this is the day we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And let us call out a blessing.